An effective way to reduce the clutter in your living room is by mounting your TV to the wall. That being said, it can be a bit intimidating if you've never done it before. The idea of putting something as heavy as a TV on a wall sounds like something you'd want to hire someone to do for you. In this video, I'll be mounting a TV in one of our rooms and taking you guys along for the ride. Hi everyone, welcome to another Tech Talk with Samir, where I talk about anything and everything related to technology in my life. If you've seen my last video, you saw that I purchased a brand new LG OLED TV to replace the one in our living room. In that video, I didn't go too much into detail about the process of wall mounting the TV, mainly because I reused the mounting hardware that was already set up in that room for my previous install. After I was happy with the setup in that room, I had to find a new spot for the old TV that used to be there. We have a den where we've kept an old TV on a TV stand for the last several years. We hardly watch TV in that room, so it's mostly just been a storage area for that particular TV. The setup is kinda clunky and it kinda kills the vibe of that room. The old TV is extremely heavy, so we've never actually considered wall mounting it. Now that we've freed up the old TV from our living room, it's finally time to reduce the clutter in the den by replacing the old TV with this one and wall mounting it. I actually made a TV mounting video a couple of years ago where I mounted one in our bedroom. This one will follow mostly the same process with a few minor tweaks to make things a little easier. One major difference this time around is that it will be on an exterior wall, so we'll have to deal with insulation behind the drywall. But we'll get to that in a bit. The first and perhaps the most important thing to do is to locate the studs behind the drywall. You'll probably want to use a stud finder for this because you do want to be precise with this. In the past, I used a pencil to mark the studs, but that just led to me having a bunch of marks on my wall. So from recent experience, I find that using painter's tape is a very effective way to mark up a wall without leaving behind a mess. One quick tip is that studs tend to be roughly 16 inches apart in residential houses, so if your stud finder is giving you indications 16 inches apart, it's probably pretty accurate. The idea here is to anchor your TV mount to these studs for a sturdy setup, because drywall, as you may know, is very fragile. The next thing to do is to unbox the TV mounting bracket. If you've watched some of my previous videos, you know that I've raved about this particular bracket quite a bit. For roughly $25, this thing is an amazing value. I've mounted TVs as large as 77-inch with this bracket. If you don't need a fancy articulating bracket, this thing will probably do the job for a majority of the people. Out of the box, it comes in two pieces and you have to use 4 screws to put it together. The next step is to attach the 2 mounting hooks to the TV itself. This is what will ultimately hook onto the bracket. They attach with just 4 screws. Depending on your TV, the specific screws that you will need may differ, but they do include all different types of screws in the box, so more than likely you'll be covered. These hooks also allow you to adjust the tilt of the TV if you choose to have a slightly downwards tilt rather than be flat on the wall. Once you've installed the hooks on the TV, this is when you can take some measurements to get an idea of exactly where the top and the bottom of the TV will be relative to the mounting bracket. The mounting bracket comes with a paper template which you're supposed to use to plan out where to drill the holes, but I find it to be not very accurate, so I don't use it for that purpose. I do, however, use it to get an idea of how the TV will look on the wall based on the measurements I took earlier. This is a good time to adjust the height of the bracket based on what looks right from your couch. Once I was happy with the height, it was then time to bring out the actual bracket to see where to drill the holes. At this point, it's very critical to make sure that your bracket is straight, otherwise you'll end up with a tilted TV on your wall. I used a level to make sure it's as straight as it can be. I then marked the spots to drill with a pen. This is where having the painter's tape was useful. I didn't have to make any marks on the actual wall itself. Just to be sure, I used the stud finder one last time to verify that those spots are actually on studs, because once you drill, there's no turning back. The first hole is not that critical because you can always adjust the rest of the holes accordingly to ensure that the bracket is straight. The only critical part is to make sure that you actually catch a stud when you drill. After I made the first hole, I actually went ahead with the first screw to anchor the bracket to the wall. This is so that I can use it as a reference to make sure that I drill in the right spots for the remaining holes. It might not be ideal to leave it hanging like that, but I'd rather do that than to get it wrong and have a tilted TV. Once I finished drilling, it was time to use the included screws to secure the bracket to the wall. These are long screws, so it may take quite a bit of wrenching to get it tightened up. I mean, it makes sense given that the entire weight of your TV will be hinging on these 4 screws. You will need a torque wrench for this step, and that's one thing that doesn't come included in the box. After I secured the bracket, I removed most of the painter's tape. At this point, you're pretty much ready to hang the TV on the bracket and just call it a day. But the next few steps that I took is the secret sauce in making a wall-mounted TV look professionally done. I don't know about you, but whenever I see a nice TV wall-mounted in a beautiful home, if it has cables running down from it, it really bothers me. It kills the whole look and feel of the room. A TV is generally placed in a spot to direct all eyes in that specific direction. And I believe that all efforts should be made to make that area as neat and distraction-free as possible. Having cables running down from the TV just totally goes against that vibe. The biggest hurdle to achieve a cableless look is power outlets. Unless if your house has a dedicated outlet on the wall for mounting a TV, you probably need to find a solution for this. The easiest way to achieve this is to use a cable organizer with a power outlet and run it behind the drywall down to a spot next to an existing outlet. You may be asking, why can't I just use an extension cord and run it behind the drywall? Well, you can, but you won't be compliant with the North American electrical codes, and it's likely a fire hazard, so please don't use an extension cord. As I mentioned earlier, this wall is an exterior wall, so that adds an extra layer of complexity as there's insulation behind the drywall. It's not hollow like an interior wall. It's not that big of a deal, but it does make things slightly more challenging when running cables. In the past, I've used a rectangular cable organizer kit to run the power and a bunch of HDMI cables. But this time around, I came across this circular one and I picked it out for a couple of specific reasons. The rectangular one was great for running a bunch of HDMI cables because it was wide enough. The circular one, however, can probably just fit one HDMI cable through the opening. Maybe two if I use thin cables. For this setup, I'm only just planning on running one HDMI cable behind the wall. And even that will be just a spare cable for perhaps connecting a laptop or some other auxiliary device. So not being able to run a bunch of cables isn't that big of a deal for me. Another reason is that this one comes with a hole saw drill bit to make the perfect size opening on the wall. With the rectangular ones, I had to manually cut out the drywall using a drywall saw, and it was probably my least favorite part of the whole process. This one also comes pre-assembled with the socket. With the old rectangular one, I had to manually connect the socket with wire nuts and screws with the electrical wire. Another step I didn't really enjoy. Before I got to cutting the drywall, I pulled out the stud finder again and checked to make sure that there wasn't any fire blocks in the way. Sometimes they have horizontal studs to prevent fires from rising up a building. It's best to look for these before cutting drywall so that you can plan accordingly. I didn't come across any, so I'm good to go. I used the included hole saw bit and made the perfect sized opening on the wall for the cable organizer. This was so much easier than having to use a drywall saw. Now, one key thing to make sure is that the hole you make has to be in a spot that will get covered up by the TV. Otherwise, it will completely defeat the purpose. When it comes to cutting the lower part of the wall, make sure to align it with the rest of the outlets that are already on the wall. This will make it so that it doesn't look too out of place on the wall. As expected, just as I got through the drywall, I ran into some insulation. But since the insulation at our house is just a foam type of material, you can push against it quite a bit without much resistance, so it wasn't much of a problem. I then used a fishing tape to go from the top to the bottom opening and then taped a HDMI cable to it. After that, it was just a matter of pulling the cable up from the top. When it came to the power cable, since only the bottom piece came unassembled, I had to pull from the bottom. It was the same process, just a matter of putting the fishing tape upwards from the bottom and pulling it downwards rather than the other way around. If you don't have any fishing tape, any rod type of material would do the trick. Depending on how high you're mounting your TV, it may not even have to be that long. The cable organizer has a faceplate that you briefly have to remove to attach it to the wall. Once I removed it, I put the HDMI cable through the opening and pushed the module into the wall. There's 3 screws that you have to tighten, and that should secure it to the wall. Now, they don't recommend using a drill for this, but I was too lazy to use a screwdriver, so I just used the drill that I had handy. I then went ahead and put the faceplate back on. It snaps right into place. The bottom module is installed in a very similar way. There's just one small extra step since you have to insert the plug portion of it into the faceplate. It's just a quick 2-screw operation, so no big deal. Depending on how high you're mounting your TV, you may or may not have some slack left over on the power cable. Just squeeze the excess cable behind the drywall to hide it. Just like the upper module, you have to make sure to insert any cables through the opening before you secure it into the wall. After I secured both ends of the cable organizer to the wall, I just plugged one end of the included extension cable into an active outlet and the other end to the newly added plug right beside it. And now I have an active power outlet for the TV that will hide neatly behind it. I then made sure to bring out enough slack on the HDMI cable so that it can reach the ports. And it was finally time to hang the TV on the bracket. Depending on the size and weight of your TV, you'll probably want to get someone's help for this step. My sister was kind and strong enough to help me with this. Depending on where your HDMI ports are, you may want to connect the cables before hanging, but for me, they were easily accessible on the left side of the TV, so I connected the cables afterwards. Along with the spare HDMI cable, I also plugged in a Roku Ultra device and neatly hid the device and all the cabling behind the TV. And I also did the same thing with the power cable. I had to use a small power strip since I did have more than one thing that required an outlet. I then hid the release pole strings with some painter's tape behind the TV. You'll need to have these accessible if you ever want to remove your TV from the wall. So using painter's tape will make sure that you can easily access them in the future. After that, it's time to power on the TV and make sure that everything is working. The final piece to making it look nice is to put a piece of furniture or object to hide all the cabling at the bottom. I found an inexpensive TV stand on Amazon and that was perfect size and color to go in this room. And there you have it. I now have a neatly mounted TV on the wall that looks professionally mounted without hiring anyone to do it. Not sure about you, but for me, whenever I complete these DIY type of projects around the house, I get a real good sense of accomplishment. And I also get to save some money along the process. Let me know in the comments if you want to see more of these DIY type of content on the channel and perhaps suggest some other ideas that I can do around the house. As always, if you haven't already, please hit the thumbs up button and subscribe to the channel to help me grow this thing. I hope you're all staying safe and I'll see you again on the next one.